You don't need no stinking bumper music, and I'm going to tell you why. I'm getting in more Twitter wars than anything. Bob Lee retires. Former compadre of mine, co-worker, somebody I've been on the staff, honored. And much, much, much more. And oh yes, I get to pick on Gabe Kapler again. You know that tomorrow, Josh Brown and I are just going to have a field day on that. Yes, my friends. We haven't done it in a while, but this is Media Watch. That is slow, isn't it? Then we got something going on right there. All right. Sean Mullooly is former sports editor, newspaper in Panama City. He's a friend of mine. He's a guy, we've actually had him on the show once because he had something to say. And, you know, the background in sports media I thought was I thought was pretty decent. And I talk with him a lot. Anyway, there's a specific author. He's not in this area, so I'm not going to muddy his name up and all this, that he really doesn't like. Anyway, this author / sportscaster wrote a book. The name of the book was Just Watch the Game. Well, I read this book, and we were just talking about it, and I said, you know, I counted 10 errors in this book. And Sean had the line of the year. Perhaps the author should then just watch the game. Because there were, like, you know, he was using this as a forum to publicly attack some people he didn't like in a sports media after a while, you know. But he was getting the criticisms wrong. I mean, he would say, this person said that. Well, he never did. I don't know, I just was personally on my mind. Okay, so, you know, maybe you should just watch the game. All right, what happened, well, was a couple months ago or a few weeks ago and all that. Steve Forbes snapped at me at a press conference because I asked him if Mladen Armas played with concussion. And Forbes never said no. He did say that after the game he was cuckoo for Cocoa Puffs, which implies that since he was out there at the end of the game against Wofford, that he did play with a concussion. I, by the way, do not really grind the axe for Forbes on that. Or, you know, he should have. How do you know? So, I mean, you'd like to be, but I want to know. And at the time, since Armas is transferring, could that have been a reason why? You question my integrity. No, I'm questioning what happened because your assistant coach told me that when you put this guy on concussion protocol, the injury did occur during the game. And you never took him out, at least not at the end. So did this actually, and never denying it, just, you know, you question my integrity. Well, yeah, you had a show cause penalty for a year. Maybe it wasn't your fault, but come on. Don't give me that. You are not my editor. I'm in line to ask the questions that I see fit. You're in line to answer them. You felt it was fit enough to yell at me for asking a question. Kind of says if you get that defensive that, yeah, Forbes did get it wrong then. Okay? And you got to look at that. Now then, I mention all this because, you know, it was like John C. Press did not make any mention of it in the conference. I talked about it. I had Steve Forbes on the next day. You know, there's not any hard feelings really. Just, you know, I understand coaches. He's a pussycat compared to some of the other coaches that I've worked with. There's one sportscaster around here, Heather Williams, WCYB. And she was tweeting out this, and she actually had the audacity to mention the press conference, by the way, where this occurred, took place at 11. I asked the question, I think it was about 11:15 or so, and I stayed until 11:25, may have been 11:20 that I asked the question or so, somewhere around in there. And I left at 11:25. I'm in Johnson City, the studio here that I do the show from I got to be here at noon in Irwin, Tennessee. How long does it take to get from Johnson City to Irwin? About a half hour. She actually has the audacity to tweet out that I had left early, like I was trying to duck him. So you know what I did? I responded on Twitter. Heather, my show begins at noon. It was 11:25. Takes a half hour to get from Johnson City to Irwin. And, some time to get to my car. Maybe you should concentrate on getting the facts right. Just saying. All right. A couple other things. Bob Lee is retired. He was a lifer at ESPN. He started when they started in 1979. Actually, he joined the third day of ESPN. Evidently ESPN began September 7th, 1979. Well, he joined on September 9th. Okay, is that close enough to being an original cast member to you? Hosted Outside the Lines for the last 29 years. Really good investigative journalism. I did think there was a bit of political slant with it, but then again, who doesn't? It's ESPN. He took a sabbatical last September. He's 64 years old. I saw him actually on Sunday. I didn't say hello to him. I don't know Bob Lee, but I was in the same banquet in Winston-Salem. It was the National Sports Media Association. He was being honored and put into the Hall of Fame, and so right after that, he announces his retirement. He was one of the anchors of the inaugural NFL Draft in 1980 that was broadcast by ESPN. ESPN, there are a lot of things ESPN has really helped promote. The NFL Draft being one of them. The North Carolina-Duke rivalry is another one, because nobody in North Carolina roots for Duke. Nobody. They did a lot of stuff outside the line about domestic violence, about the concussions in the NFL, bringing to light that. Won 11 Sports Emmy Awards, and like I said, was inducted in the National Sports Media Association Hall of Fame this past week. So, great career. And really, I do try to have something of a journalistic flair into this show, if you will. And what do I always say about this market? I say so many people in the sports media are thinking of themselves as extensions of the public relations department and not necessarily as journalists, which is not what you're supposed to do. I mean, it's 180 degrees away from what you're supposed to do. But it doesn't make waves. No, you'll never be great, but, you'll be able to have your little cubby hole over here, and you can make your small salary. You don't have to worry about getting fired in a market where, there's no unions and contracts are generally, either non-existent or not very lucrative, that sort of thing. It doesn't give a whole lot of, freedom to you, that sort of thing. Anyway, Lee was not that. Lee was the antithesis of that. Gotta respect that. Just not the beard he's been wearing lately. I shouldn't be, people who make fun of others' appearances, I've never been really comfortable with that. Let's see here. I mentioned that I wanted to talk a little bit about somebody that I had worked with, and who's actually been a guest on this show, and it's Bill Hillgrove, who is the voice of the Pittsburgh Steelers, as well as the voice of the Pitt Panthers. And way back in 1998, I was actually fortunate enough to be able to work with Bill Hillgrove. I was a sideline reporter for a game on the Pitt Football Network. That was a huge, huge deal for me right there. And anyway, Bill Hillgrove is now 77 years old. He has been announcing University of Pittsburgh games since 1969. He was a color commentator then. He's been the play-by-play man for the Panthers since 1974. Occasionally might miss a game if there's a conflict with the Steelers or something. Dan Rooney selected him to be the Steelers announcer when Jack Fleming retired in 94. When Jack Fleming, after 93, really was something of a forced retirement. But he became the sportscaster. He became the Steelers broadcaster there. Anyway, Bill Hillgrove was named by the National Sports Media Association as the voice of college sports or at least he won the Voice of College Sports Award. It is very well deserved. We would talk about it, because I covered Pitt with them. We'd talk about some of these great announcers, the John Wards, the Bob Fultons, all those guys who have been there forever. And what can you say? I mean, 51 years, 51 seasons behind the mic. Think about that. Now, he's the second person to win this award. He's been on this show, Voice of College Sports Award by the NSMA. The inaugural winner was Don Fisher, voice of Indiana Hoosiers basketball. Hillgrove, the second longest tenured play-by-play broadcaster in D1 basketball. He's behind also in Pittsburgh, Ray Goss, who actually I've worked with as well and is a tremendous guy. Ray Goss does Duquesne. I know that's not a big, thing. He was calling Duquesne games when they were making the NCAA tournament. Imagine that. It's been a while, but yeah, very smooth play-by-play guy. Anyway, just my congratulations. Co-worker, wanted to mention that he's been a guest on the show. And, you talk about the journalistic flair and all this. He actually, I remember, told the story that he used to be a TV sports anchor, and he did a story on the Steelers. Dan Rooney didn't like it. He called him up and said, this is where I think you got it wrong, and it was unfair. And 3 years later, Dan Rooney made him the play-by-play announcer of the Steelers. So you want to talk about being forgiving and all that, but also being respected, so that maybe you could stub your toe. Or do a story that didn't see eye to eye with. And that says something about that market, because, I can recall when ETSU wouldn't credential me because I had the audacity to question their decision to drop football. Unethical? And nobody around it. This is why I say they're more inclined to be the PR department around here than journalism. People did not stick up for me for that. So, there you go. And I don't think I need to say anything more about that. I did touch upon this in our media. Now I got the National Braves announcer. Jeff Francoeur, this earlier in the week, said he wished he would have punched Wilson Contreras. Contreras is the Cubs catcher. You can actually vote for him to make the All-Star game if you are so inclined. By the way, the voting for that ends at 10 p.m. today. So get on MLB.com and cast your All-Star ballot and all that. But where's this all come from? What's this all about? You would like to, hit the Cubs catcher back in the day. Where did that come from? Well, I'll tell you. Braves broadcast Monday night. I wish I would have just thrown a haymaker when we're calling an on-field argument. Did the Braves announcer Francoeur that he had with Contreras when Contreras became something of the subject of the story of Monday's game, which was a Braves loss. Got to give it to Contreras, though. Keep taking the high road and being the professional, because after hearing that he wished that he had hit him 3 years ago, Contreras says, that makes me laugh. What can I say about that, man? Poor guy, that's all. He should behave as a professional. If he's going to be behind the screen, he should be a professional. He was a ball player, played a lot in the big leagues, but now he's behind the screen, and he should have respect for everyone. He knows better. He knows how things go on the field. That's it. He's a poor guy. Contreras wins. Oh yeah, Contreras wins. So, anyway, that is, the next thing is that defending the action, let's see here. So, anyway, that's just a story that goes out there. I find it to be, What I can't understand is Steve Blass for really not making a statement about Ron Acuna's jewelry, was lambasted in the national media, totally defended by his own, and rightfully so. He actually didn't make a comment. There was a little bit of read between the lines, implication. 70-something broadcasters saying, boy, that guy has a lot of jewelry on. But you had people trying to call him a racist. Really? Greg Brown was on this very show defending Steve Blass after that, and rightfully so. Brown is the Pirates announcer. Why did a statement not made, get more publicity than I should have hit the guy 3 years ago? Really? One is a non-story that was tried to be a personal assassination from people like Craig Calcaterra, who is not above personal assassination if you go against his political views and such on NBCSports.com. The other is saying, I would like to punch this person. Explain that to me. I don't think it can be. Times that we're living in, and again, not all change is good. New Coke and Miley Cyrus. Last thing, I want to get to this. Oh boy, oh boy, oh boy. Earlier in the month, there's a sports talk show host in Philly, pretty well known, Angelo Cataldi. Okay, Angelo Cataldi. And he was interviewing Gabe Kapler. Now, the Phillies have basically been in a tailspin since Andrew McCutchen went down. Leadoff hitter, starting center fielder. And what happened was that Jan Segura didn't get out of the batter's box, failed to run out of pop-up. And what had happened is that McCutchen was on at first base. And so instead of running it out, infield fly rule is in effect, Padres try to let the ball drop so they can turn the double play. And so on that play then, Kutch is injured, trying to get to second base. And Cataldi rightfully questions Kapler about his team's hustle, about Segura not running out to first base. Kapler says, Segura has been one of our best players. He doesn't deserve to be scapegoated like this. Although, had he been running to first base, then Kutch, he can just stay at first base. And if they let it fall, they can throw him out at second real easy. But, you still got the runner at first. It's just a matter of trying to decide who to double off. And also there's a chance that ball takes a bad hop if you let it drop in, all that sort of stuff. Kapler says it was absolutely irresponsible and categorically untrue to blame McCutchen's injury on Segura. Really? Kapler told the sports talk show host that Kutch got hurt because he was in a rundown, planted his foot wrong, and his knee gave out. Sounds to me, though, that it wouldn't have happened if Segura had run to first base all the way. Then Kapler took issue with Cataldi for claiming the entire city of Philly blamed Segura for Kutch's injury. You don't speak for the whole city. You talk to the guys that call in, the men and women that call in. By the way, Rick Pitino used to make similar statements about sports talk radio and all that, which can be brutal, which is why I love it. And so Cataldi then shoots back, and the ones that email, and the ones that are on Twitter, and all of the other people. Are you trying to tell me that you're more plugged into the city than I am? You have been on the West Coast for a week, Gabe, and plus, Kapler is hardly a Philly guy, let's face it. And a guy named Cataldi, he is. Kapler responds, I tell you this, what you're plugged into are the people that call into your show, not all the fans of Philadelphia like you represent. Really? Now, admittedly, you do get hosts, they'll say, I'm the voice of this town and all that. And that's sort of a marketing thing. And it's probably a little bit much. But I think Angelo Cataldi is a little bit more tuned in to Philly than Gabe Kapler is, And for that matter, he ought to be. He's a sports talk show host. And for that matter, a manager can't be managing on what the fans tell him to do. He's got to have the own intestinal fortitude to go against them at some time. But now I understand Kapler is trying to defend his player, But you know what? He doesn't say, there really isn't a defense of Segura. All right. So, Typical sports talk show host, manager getting into it and all this. And then, here we go again. WIP, by the way, it's a sports talk radio station. It's one of the more, how shall we say this, influential sports radio stations in the country. It was one of the first. They also kind of had, before Twitter, rules that a caller could only be in for, say, 90 seconds or 2 minutes. Get in, get out. This isn't about the caller, it's about the host, that sort of thing. Howard Eskin was really big there, and Philly's a big, obviously, sports talk town. WIP is put out of business other radio stations that have a sports talk format with better signals than they did. I will say that. I know I used to listen to a sports talk radio station on 1210 AM, which had a 50,000 watt signal. I used to listen to it down here. But it wasn't, as edgy. It wasn't as hard-hitting. And it didn't succeed. Well, now Kapler, discussing players not hustling, the decision not to bench said players for not hustling, intriguing. Kapler calls in to speak with Cataldi and says, hey, I'm not going to manage to please the Phillies fans on WIP. Here's a question I get asked. Randall Cunningham, who was a pretty good quarterback, but his career with the Eagles really dissolved when he started listening to sports talk radio in Philly and using it as a gauge of his play, and it just tore him apart. And he had to sit out for a year, and he went to the Minnesota Vikings, then put up a 15-1 record late in his career. But in Philly, he lost his job to Rodney Peete. I would suggest, Gabe Kapler, and look, I don't think you're a very good manager, but I would suggest, if you are not going to cater to the fans of WIP with your managing, which I think you shouldn't do. No, you shouldn't let sports talk radio influence you. I remember actually doing a paper on sports talk radio and asking the late Chuck Tanner. I was a younger man, obviously, then. And he said, look, I wasn't influenced by sports. I did what I had to do, I wasn't going to let what the media dictate what my role as a manager and what decisions I made, or certainly the fans in the stands, I didn't, if they booed my decision for a pinch hitter or something, I didn't pull them back. No, Kapler needs to accept that attitude. And he really does come across a little bit as this, love me, want me type of, fella right now. And even though the Phillies are giving him they're giving him that vote of confidence, just say this. You're a Braves fan. You want Kapler to have that vote of confidence, to stay on the whole year. Last year he said that the Phillies were playing just as well as they ever had and all this. And then they collapsed in September, finished with a losing record, and actually fell to third place behind the Nats. Now, you get the feeling that same collapse, and it does go a little bit more than just the Kutch injury. You really start to wonder, with him preaching about how he's a player's manager and my door is always open, but really just treating them like numbers with his analytic study. And you really have to wonder. And just like getting ejected by Joe West for arguing about getting a warning on his... You're not allowed to argue warnings. Okay, you're trying to fire up your team. Eventually they win the game. Okay, fine. That sort of thing. But I really think, I've said that I think the Braves are in first place to stay. One of the reasons why is that, I think that the captain of the Phillies ship is a lunatic. I've said that many a time. And, I've just proven it now. Tri-City Sports Now. I'm going to tell you a little bit about the Appalachian League when we come back.
Trav, the boys will be taking a trifecta approach to outdoor recreation.